The desert morning began with a silence so complete it felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to wake it, and it was in this vast, breathless quiet that the young man stumbled across the cracked earth, half conscious, half hoping, and wholly lost, though he did not yet know how deeply or how long he had been wandering, for all he remembered was pain, sun, and the echo of a name he could not grasp. But this emptiness, this absence of identity, was not what would define him, for fate had already set another path in motion, and that path was walking toward him with the steady, unwavering steps of a woman who had survived more storms than she could count. Navi, matriarch of the Eagle's Breath Apache, carried herself with a spirit that seemed to fuse with the land, resilient, wise, and timeless, and though she had seen many wanderers cross the wasteland, none had ever stirred the quiet ache she carried in her heart, the ache of a lineage fading with time, of stories that might one day be spoken by no one, of a bloodline strong but dwindling, threatened not by enemies but by silence. And so when she saw the collapsed figure in the distance, she felt the spirits shift, as if the wind itself leaned toward her and whispered, "Look again," and she did, seeing not a stranger but a possibility. She approached the man, who lay half buried beneath wind-blown dust, his lips dry, his breath faint, and as she knelt beside him, brushing sand from his brow, she noticed something unsettling yet profoundly familiar, the resilience in his eyes even in the face of near death, a resilience she recognized from every ancestor who had ever fought to live another day. Without hesitation, she lifted his head, let a few drops of precious water fall between his cracked lips, and as he swallowed, something like life returned to him, if only a spark. When he finally managed to open his eyes fully, he found himself staring into the steady, deep gaze of a woman who seemed carved from truth itself, a presence so commanding yet gentle that he felt, for the first time since waking in the wasteland, safe. He tried to speak, tried to ask who she was or who he was, but no words formed, just a soft, broken sound. She placed a hand on his chest, firm yet comforting, and said, "You do not need to speak now. You only need to breathe." And so he did. She gathered him with surprising strength, guiding him toward her horse, lifting him into the saddle with a care usually reserved for family, not for unknown men found in barren lands. But Navi had never made choices by what the world expected. She made choices by the pull in her spirit, by the truth that revealed itself in moments like these, when life presented crossroads disguised as wounded strangers. As they traveled toward her village beneath the high plateau, the young man drifted in and out of consciousness, each awakening filled with fleeting images. Sunlight on her braids, the soft crunch of sand under hooves, the calming melody of her steady breaths, but what he remembered most were her words, repeated each time he stirred, spoken like a promise, "You are not alone." When they reached the village, the people gathered in cautious curiosity, for Navi rarely brought outsiders, and certainly never broken ones, but she simply raised a hand and said, "He is under my care," and that was enough. They trusted their matriarch with their past, their present, and their future. Days passed as the stranger healed, and though his body recovered, his memory remained shrouded in fog. Some in the village worried he was a danger, a wanderer fleeing something terrible, while others believed he was just a victim of the merciless desert. But Navi saw something deeper. She saw a soul untouched by cruelty, a gentleness in his movements, a quiet humility in the way he listened to the stories the elders shared as he sat by the evening fires. When he had regained enough strength to stand, Navi invited him to walk with her through the canyon where the wind carried echoes of old songs, and there she finally asked, "What do you remember?" The man hesitated, searching the empty corners of his mind before finally whispering, "Only that I was lost, and that I am still lost." To his surprise, Navi smiled, not with amusement but with understanding, and said, "All who are found were once lost. That is no shame." As they continued walking, the man began to feel something unfamiliar yet comforting, a sense of belonging, not born of memory but of presence, as if the desert itself welcomed him. Over the next weeks he helped with simple tasks, carrying water, gathering wood, tending to horses, and though he worked quietly, he worked with a sincerity that softened even the most skeptical hearts in the tribe, for he asked for nothing and thanked everyone, gestures that reminded them of old teachings about humility and gratitude. Yet something within the village remained unspoken. Navi had no children, and with her advancing age, the future of her bloodline stood at a precipice. Many in the tribe accepted this with silent sorrow, believing the spirits had chosen a different path for her, but Navi herself held a different interpretation. She believed that destiny often arrived unexpectedly, disguised in forms no one predicted, and that the man who had wandered into her life might very well be the answer to a question she had not yet known how to ask. One evening, under the glow of the setting sun, Navi gathered a small group of elders and invited the stranger to sit with them. She spoke of dreams she had experienced during his healing, visions of a man without a past but with a heart strong enough to carry a future, a man whose presence revived old songs in her soul, and when she finished, the elders exchanged glances filled with awe and contemplation. The stranger, overwhelmed and confused, insisted softly, "I do not know who I was. I have nothing to offer." But Navi shook her head and replied, "The past is not what gives a man value. It is what he chooses from this moment forward." Her words touched him deeply, stirring something long dormant, something like hope. Over the following days, Navi and the stranger, whom the tribe began calling Chaitan, meaning falcon, for the way he observed the world with quiet intensity, spent more time together, not as healer and patient but as two souls learning each other's stories, even when one story remained half unwritten. She taught him the meanings behind the sacred songs, the art of reading the desert signs, the way kindness could shape a life more powerfully than heritage. He, in turn, shared the few fragments of memory that surfaced, glimpses of running water, the distant sound of laughter, a melody hummed by someone he once cared for. Yet even with these fragments, he felt no longing to return to a life he could not recall, for the life before him now felt more real than any shadow of a past ever could. As the bond between them deepened, whispers spread through the village, some supportive, some hesitant, but Navi paid them little mind, for her heart had already accepted what many had not yet embraced, that family was not defined solely by blood but by choice, by compassion, by the courage to begin anew. The village, though cautious, began to see the impact Chaitan had, how he brought water early in the morning for the elders, how he lifted children onto his shoulders during gatherings, how he listened to every story shared with him as if it were a treasure. Still, the turning point arrived unexpectedly one scorching afternoon when a young child went missing in the canyons. Panic rippled through the community, for the canyons were beautiful but unforgiving, filled with shadowed crevices where the earth swallowed sound. Without hesitation, Chaitan ran into the labyrinth of stone, following faint footprints and listening for any cry that might echo through the shifting winds. Hours passed, the sun dipping low, but he did not stop, driven not by duty but by instinct, an instinct born from the compassion Navi had shown him. When he finally found the child, trembling and dehydrated, perched on a narrow ledge above a steep drop, Chaitan moved with careful reassurance, speaking soft, calming words until he could lift the child safely into his arms. As he carried the small boy back toward the village, the setting sun cast a golden glow over them, and Navi, watching from across the plateau, felt her breath catch in her chest, for in that moment she saw not just a man but a father, a protector, a foundation upon which a new beginning could be built. When Chaitan reached her, the child clinging to him with trust, Navi felt tears fill her eyes, not tears of sorrow but of clarity. And she placed a hand on Chaitan's face, whispering, "You saved more than a life today. You saved a future." From that day forward, the village viewed him not as a wanderer but as one of their own, and Chaitan began to feel something he had never experienced, not just belonging, but purpose, the sense that he was exactly where he was meant to be. One night beneath a sky dusted with endless stars, Navi and Chaitan sat by the fire, the air warm with unspoken truths, and Navi finally said the words that had echoed in her heart since the day she found him, "Chaitan, I chose you. Not because the spirits demanded it, but because your kindness reminded me that bloodlines are not simply born, they are built. And I wish to build mine with you." Chaitan, overwhelmed, felt emotion surge through him like a breaking wave, and for the first time since his awakening, he felt no fear, no confusion, only certainty that this woman, this tribe, this life, was his home. "If you will have me," he said softly, "then my life begins with you." The wind, as if blessing the moment, swept across the fire, sending sparks upward like rising prayers, and Navi smiled with a depth that could warm even the coldest soul. In the years that followed, Chaitan became woven into the heart of the tribe, standing at Navi's side as partner, guardian, and eventual father to children who bore the strength of two worlds, children raised on stories of resilience, compassion, and the belief that family could be forged from kindness even more powerfully than from blood. Navi's lineage, once in danger of fading into silence, blossomed with new life, new laughter, new stories passed from generation to generation, all rooted in a love born not from tradition but from the simple, transformative power of humanity. And even after many seasons, when the desert winds carried whispers of the past, the people would tell the tale of the day a matriarch discovered a lost man in the wasteland and chose not just to save him, but to begin anew with him, not out of obligation, but out of the belief that no one is ever truly lost as long as someone chooses to see their worth. And so the story lived on, reminding all who heard it that sometimes the greatest miracles begin with a single act of compassion, and that hope, like a seed in the desert, blooms brightest when watered with kindness.